Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about zones and trade wars, the negative. So I did an introductory episode and I did the positive, another episode on the positives, and then now we're looking at the negatives, right? So zones, as I do in every episode, just to give a quick definition, zones, whatever you want to call them, enterprise areas, foreign trade zones, free zones, which is a very common name, industrial parks, anything you want to call them, they're the same thing. They're a designated area, designated by a government, whether by law, decree, regulation, however it comes about, that says the rules that apply in that area are slightly different than what happens in the rest of the country, and special incentives such as duty-free off items brought into the zone, provided they stay in the zone, whether it be for raw materials or building materials, whatever it is, right? Inputs into production, etc. You may also have a reduced corporate income tax rate and other types of incentives, right? Now, with the geopolitical atmosphere that we have now, and I'll remind that the World Economic Forum, their World Risk Report 2025 ranked geo-economic confrontation as the third highest risk that we face globally, and it's playing out now in terms of ensuing trade wars, or trade wars that are actually underway, with tariffs being raised on different countries and countries retaliating. Zones offer a platform to allow a country to pivot, whether it's for finding new investors, different products, new markets, etc., etc. However, there is a negative side, and the negative side is this, or one of the negatives is that a zone might have attracted global investors, and maybe some of those investors are from some of the countries that are being targeted. So all of a sudden, what you might find is that your country becomes a target, potentially. So, for example, with the US, you have the ports in Panama around the canal, or at either end of the canal, Atlantic side or the Pacific side, being run by Chinese company, right? And China is being targeted in some of these tariffs, and amongst other types of retaliatory actions. You may find, although you've heard it in terms of threats, in terms of taking over the canal and all that by the U.S., you'll find that threats towards a country is not necessarily targeted at them, but because the real target is present as an investor in your country, you might find that you become, you pay the consequences of that, unfortunately. And typically, not always, some of these are going to be special economic zones. So that's the negative side of things. In addition to that, it is because of the duty-free nature of most zones, if not all zones, that's the one fiscal incentives that is almost universal. You may find that in terms of calculating a duty, a country may say, in order to eliminate that advantage that is there, we're going to levy a certain tariff so that you're trading with us in an unfair way. So from your zone, and most of your exports or a sizable part of your exports comes from your zones. And as a result of that, they're going to, in a sense, put on a top up, so to speak, to eliminate what is they deem as being an unfair advantage to you. And zones play a prominent role in trade. In some countries, it's bigger than the other. And in some sectors, it's bigger than the other. Even the US, Canada, and Mexico, all three have zones, right? Typically called foreign trade zones. And many of them are close to the borders of each other. So Mexico, US, and then Canada, Mexico. Zones, of course, play an oversized role in certain industries, namely the automotive sector. Not exclusively, but it plays an oversized role in the automotive sector between the three countries, Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. Right. So here again, you see where even though it's the tariffs may be country specific, because of the nature of the zones and how they operate and what they were set up to do in terms of functioning within a global supply chain, specifically a North America centric supply chain, whenever those sanctions are levied, there's an oversized impact on those zones due to the nature of them. So those are some of the negatives, and that's the U.S. But it can happen elsewhere, right? It can happen U.S., Canada, Mexico, but it can happen elsewhere whenever a trade war ensues. So if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe. If you want to see me do a particular topic or you just want to say hi, just leave me a comment down below and I'll get right back to you. Bye for now.